What happens when a letter from a mother becomes more powerful than any story ever told on television? LeVar Burton closed the book. The studio fell silent. No music, no cameras moving, just the sound of paper being unfolded. And then, something no one expected, tears streaming down his face as he read words that would change Reading Rainbow forever. But how did a simple letter stop the most beloved children's show in television history? It was 1992, a Tuesday afternoon taping at WNED Studios in Buffalo. Reading Rainbow was in its 9th season, and LeVar Burton had become America's literary guide for millions of children. The routine was familiar: select a book, bring it to life, inspire young minds to explore new worlds through reading. That day's book was The Wall, by Eve Bunting, a story about the Vietnam Veterans Memorial and a young boy searching for his grandfather's name. The crew had set up the usual arrangement: LeVar in his signature spot, cameras positioned, lighting perfect, audience of children sitting cross-legged on the floor, eyes wide with anticipation. LeVar opened the book. His voice carried that warmth that had comforted a generation of readers. He began reading about the boy and his father walking along the black granite wall, fingers tracing names of the fallen. The children listened. The cameras rolled. Everything was going exactly as planned. Then, during a scheduled break, a production assistant approached LeVar with an envelope. "This just arrived," she whispered. "The sender said it was urgent. Said her son is in the audience today." LeVar glanced at the letter, then at the crowd of children. One boy, maybe 8 years old, sat in the third row. He wasn't smiling like the others. He wasn't fidgeting or whispering to friends. He just stared ahead, holding a worn photograph against his chest. LeVar made a decision that would break every protocol Reading Rainbow had ever followed. "Can we hold for a moment?" LeVar said to the director. The cameras stopped. The crew exchanged confused glances. In 9 seasons, LeVar had never stopped a taping like this. He walked off the set, envelope in hand, and sat down on the floor next to the quiet boy. The child looked up, surprised, still clutching that photograph. "What's your name?" LeVar asked softly. "Michael," the boy whispered. "Michael, is your mom here today?" The boy shook his head. "She couldn't come. She had to work. But she wrote you a letter." LeVar opened the envelope. What he read in the next 60 seconds would transform everything. The letter was handwritten, ink smudged in places where tears had fallen. "Dear Mr. Burton, my name is Rebecca. My son Michael is in your audience today. His father, David, was killed in Vietnam 3 months before Michael was born. Michael never met his father, never heard his voice, never felt his arms. For 8 years I've tried to help him understand who his daddy was, but words always failed me. Then Michael discovered your show. He discovered books. And somehow, through stories, he began to understand. He learned that heroes exist in pages, that love transcends time, that fathers live forever in the memories we keep." LeVar's hands trembled as he continued reading. "Today you're reading The Wall. Michael asked me if his daddy's name is on that wall. I told him yes. He asked if we could visit it someday. I told him we will. But right now, we can't afford the trip to Washington. We can barely afford groceries. So Michael asked if he could come to your show instead. He said if he can't visit his daddy's wall, maybe he can hear you read about it. Maybe that would be close enough." LeVar looked up from the letter. Michael was crying silently, tears rolling down his cheeks. "Mr. Burton, thank you for giving my son something I couldn't give him, a way to understand loss without being destroyed by it. Thank you for teaching him that reading isn't escape, it's connection. You helped him find his father in the pages of books, in the stories of courage, in the quiet moments when a voice reads to you and makes you feel less alone." The studio had gone completely silent. Crew members had stopped working. The other children sat frozen, sensing something profound was happening but not quite understanding what. LeVar folded the letter carefully and looked at Michael. "Can I see the picture you're holding?" Michael handed him a faded photograph. A young soldier in uniform, smiling, confident, alive. On the back, written in careful script, "David Michael Harrison, Born 1947. Kia 1971. Forever 24. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. LeVar stood up, walked back to his chair, but he didn't pick up the wall. Instead, he looked directly into the camera, not at the children in the studio, but through the lens, to every child watching at home. "We're going to do something different today," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm going to tell you about a real wall, and a real hero, and why books matter more than you might understand right now." The director started to intervene, but the executive producer touched his arm. "Let him go," she whispered. "Just let him go." LeVar held up the photograph of Michael's father. "This is David. He was someone's son, someone's husband. And he would have been someone's father, if he'd lived long enough to meet the boy sitting right here." He gestured to Michael, who was wiping tears with his sleeve. "David never got to read to his son. He never got to show him how books can take you anywhere, teach you anything, help you understand what feels impossible to understand. But you know what? Through reading, Michael found his father anyway." LeVar's voice broke. He paused, struggling to maintain composure. "Because that's what books do. They connect us across time, across distance, across loss. When you read about courage, you meet courageous people. When you read about sacrifice, you understand why people make impossible choices. And when you read about walls covered in names, you understand that every name was a person, and every person left behind someone who loved them." He opened the wall again, but this time, he didn't read from the script. He improvised, weaving Michael's story into Eve Bunting's narrative. "There's a boy in this book searching for his grandfather's name. There's a boy in this studio searching for his father's name. Both boys are looking for the same thing, proof that someone existed, that someone mattered, that someone is remembered." The cameras captured everything. LeVar crying, Michael crying, crew members wiping their eyes. LeVar knelt down next to Michael again. "Your dad's name is on that wall in Washington. And someday, you'll go there and touch it, and you'll feel connected to him. But until then, every time you open a book, every time you read about heroes, about sacrifice, about love, you're touching his name in a different way." He handed Michael the book. "This is for you. And I want you to do something for me." "What?" Michael whispered. "I want you to keep reading. Keep learning. Keep growing into the man your father would be proud of. Because that's how we honor people we've lost. We become the best versions of ourselves." Michael clutched the book like it was precious treasure. But LeVar wasn't finished. "And everyone watching at home, kids, parents, teachers, I want you to understand something. Reading Rainbow isn't just about books. It's about connection. It's about finding yourself in stories, finding others in narratives, finding hope in pages." He looked at the photograph again, then at Michael, then at the camera. "Michael's mom wrote that I helped her son find his father in books. But the truth is, every parent who reads to their child is building a bridge. Every teacher who opens a book with students is creating connection. Every person who says, 'Hey, you should read this,' is offering something sacred, shared experience." The studio erupted in applause. But it wasn't the usual polite audience clapping. It was raw, emotional, cathartic. Children who didn't fully understand why were clapping because the adults were crying. Adults were crying because they understood exactly what had just happened. Something unrehearsed, unscripted, utterly real had just occurred on a children's television show. LeVar hugged Michael. The boy held on to him like he was holding on to his father. And maybe in that moment he was holding on to the idea that good men exist, that mentors appear when needed, that the world contains people who care about children they've never met. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The episode that aired was unlike any Reading Rainbow had ever produced. They kept the raw footage, LeVar stopping, reading the letter, talking to Michael, the tears, the improvisation, the humanity. Thousands of letters poured in afterward. Parents writing about reading to children who'd lost someone. Teachers describing students who found comfort in books during impossible times. Veterans thanking LeVar for honoring David's memory. But the most important letter came 3 weeks later. From Rebecca, Michael's mother. Dear Mr. Burton, I watched the episode with Michael. When it was over, he turned to me and said, Mom, Dad would have liked him. That's the first time my son has ever spoken about his father in present tense, as if David is still here, still watching, still proud. You gave my son something I'd been trying to give him for 8 years. Permission to love someone he never met. Permission to grieve someone he never knew. Permission to be proud of a father who exists only in photographs and stories. Michael now reads every night. He says he's reading to his dad, wherever he is. He says his dad can hear him through the pages. Thank you for stopping your show. Thank you for seeing my son. Thank you for proving that sometimes the most important thing isn't following the script, it's following your heart. LeVar kept that letter in his dressing room for the rest of Reading Rainbow's run. Whenever he felt tired, whenever the schedule felt overwhelming, whenever he questioned whether children's television mattered, he read Rebecca's words. Years later, in interviews, LeVar would say that moment changed him. I realized Reading Rainbow was never about me reading books, he said. It was about creating space for children to feel seen, understood, valued. That day with Michael taught me that education isn't just information transfer, it's emotional connection. The photograph of David Harrison stayed on LeVar's desk. A reminder that every child watching had a story, every family had struggles, every moment of genuine human connection mattered more than perfect production value. Michael grew up. He joined the military, like his father. But unlike his father, he came home. In 2015, he wrote to LeVar. Dear Mr. Burton, I'm 31 now. I'm a father myself. My daughter's name is Davida, after my dad. Every night I read to her. I tell her about her grandfather she never met, and about the day a man on television saw a scared little boy and decided protocol mattered less than compassion. I visited the wall in 2003. I found my father's name. I touched it, like you said I would. And I cried like you knew I would. But I also smiled, because I realized something. My father's name isn't just on that wall. It's in every book I've ever read, every story that taught me about courage, every moment I felt connected to something larger than myself. You didn't just read books on television, Mr. Burton. You taught a generation that reading is how we touch the untouchable, know the unknowable, love the ones we've lost. Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for changing my life. LeVar Burton still has that letter. He carries it when he speaks at events, when he advocates for literacy, when he reminds people that children's programming matters. Because on a Tuesday afternoon in 1992, a mother's letter proved that sometimes the script needs to be abandoned, the cameras need to stop rolling, and a man needs to sit on the floor with a grieving child and prove through presence that love transcends loss, connection transcends distance, and reading transcends everything. The legacy of that moment extends far beyond one episode. Reading Rainbow continued for another 14 years, but that day became its defining moment. Not the Emmy Awards, not the celebrity guests, not the millions of books distributed, but the afternoon LeVar Burton chose a child over production value. Teachers across America began incorporating that episode into grief counseling curricula. School psychologists used it to help children process loss. Military family support groups showed it to kids whose parents deployed or didn't come home. The Veterans Administration even contacted LeVar, asking permission to use the footage in programs supporting Gold Star families, those who'd lost loved ones in service. LeVar agreed immediately, refusing any compensation. In 2006, Michael attended a Reading Rainbow reunion event in Los Angeles. He was 22, recently returned from his first deployment in Iraq. He brought his own daughter, 3-year-old Davida, and a copy of The Wall that LeVar had signed 14 years earlier. When LeVar saw him across the room, he stopped mid-conversation and walked directly to Michael. They embraced like family, because in many ways they were. You kept reading, LeVar said, noticing the way Michael's daughter clung to the book. Every single night, Michael replied. Just like you told me to. Davida looked up at LeVar with those wide, curious eyes that every Reading Rainbow host recognizes, the look of a child ready to discover worlds. Mr. Burton, she said with the confidence only a 3-year-old possesses. My daddy says you're magic. LeVar knelt down to her level, just as he'd done with her father years ago. Not magic, sweetheart. Just someone who believes in the power of stories. Just like your daddy. Just like your grandpa you never met, but who loved stories too. That night, LeVar added a new photograph to his collection, Michael, Bevita, and himself, 3 generations connected by books, by loss, by hope. The photo sits beside David Harrison's military portrait in LeVar's home office. A reminder that the work continues, that stories heal across decades, that one moment of genuine human connection creates ripples that never stop spreading. When people ask LeVar about his proudest achievement, he doesn't mention Star Trek or the dozens of awards or the millions of children reached. He talks about a Tuesday in 1992 when he stopped reading a book and started truly seeing a child. That's when I understood, he says, that reading to children isn't about literacy alone. It's about witnessing them, honoring their stories, showing them that their pain matters, their questions matter, they matter. The letter from Rebecca still hangs, framed, in LeVar's study. Below it, a small plaque reads, "The day I learned to stop reading and start listening." Because sometimes the most important story isn't in the book. Sometimes it's in the letter carried by a child, written by a mother who couldn't afford the trip to Washington but could afford hope. Sometimes it's in the moment when a television host becomes a human being, when protocol surrenders to compassion, when tears become the most honest thing ever broadcast to millions of children. Michael Harrison serves as a reading volunteer now, working with children of deployed military members. He uses his father's story, LeVar's example, and the lesson he learned that day, that healing happens when we stop performing and start connecting, when we close the script and open our hearts.